Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long have you been about it? I'm afraid you have had very little experience in how to propose.
My own one. I've never really loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. They're quite blue. I hope you always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
All right, now Lady Bracknell enters, so go ahead and stay there just for a second. You're still on one knee when she comes in. So Morgan has agreed to play the part of Lady Bracknell, and so you can go ahead and scoot closer to the podium, Brittany, so Morgan can stand beside you. All right? And Morgan, Lady Bracknell answers, and enters, and Lady Bracknell says,
Mr. Worthing, rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It's most indecorous.
Mama!
So he's trying to rise, and she holds him down. Now, we're not going to play that part, but she's holding him down, saying, don't rise. Mama, go ahead.
Mama, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finish what, may I ask?
I'm engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mama.
So they rise together. All right. So Mike, you can get up and stand back over here. So they get up, and Lady Bracknell says,
Pardon me, you are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come on a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant, as the case may be.
Yeah, it's a funny line there. When you get engaged, it's going to be a surprise to you. And it may be pleasant, it may not be pleasant, depending on who the guy is, but it's going to be a surprise to you, as Mama's thinking. Go ahead.
It is hardly a matter that she could be allowed to arrange for herself. And now I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I am making these inquiries, you, Gwendolyn, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mama!
In the carriage, Gwendolyn.
All right, notice what happens in the brackets here. Gwendolyn goes to the door. She and Jack blow kisses to each other behind Lady Bracknell's back. Sweet, yes. Lady Bracknell looks vaguely about, as if she could not understand what the noise was, and she finally turns around and she says,
Gwendolyn, the carriage.
Yes, Mama.
All right, so Gwendolyn, you can go have a seat. Thank you for your good job reading with that. All right, now we get to the interrogation. Mama needs to find out about this guy that just proposed to her daughter, and Mama's not going to be very likely to allow this, but Mike is going to try his best to make sure that Mama approves of this marriage. Go ahead.
You can take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell, but I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men.
Yes, notice in the bracket, she has a pencil and notebook, so she's going to take furious notes as to what she thinks about him. Go ahead.
Although I have the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton has, we work together, in fact. However, I am quite ready to enter your name, should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I admit I do smoke.
I am glad to hear of it.
Not the answer he was expecting. Go ahead.
A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I have always been of opinion that a man who desires to get married should know either everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I am pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate exotic fruit. Touch it and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England, at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, would prove a serious danger to the upper classes and probably lead to acts of violence in the Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
You see that little slight there that our author puts against England's educational system there, saying the education system is worthless, that produces no effect. So Oscar Wilde there is really going against the education in England. Anyway, what is your income?
Between $7,000 and $8,000 a year.
And land or investments?
Investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That's all that can be said about land.
All right, stay up here. We're going to skip just a little part. Basically, he asks her where she lives, and he explains that he lives in this country house, and she goes, well, that's not going to do. My daughter's not going to live in a country house. She has to live in a city house. And he explains he does have a city house, but he rents it out to somebody, and she tries to interrogate where the city house is, what part of town it is, if it's a good town or a good part of town or a bad part of town. Anyway, partway down that right-hand column, she asks him, are your parents living? Jack, go ahead and start in the line, partway down that right-hand column that says, I've lost both my parents.
I have lost both my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness.
Is that sort of ridiculous? If you lose one parent, oh, that's sad. If you lose both parents, that's carelessness. Like it's his fault that both his parents are lost. Keep going.
Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers call the purple of commerce, or did he rise from the ranks of
Of the aristocracy.
aristocracy?
I'm afraid I really don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said I had lost my parents. It would be nearer the truth to say that my parents would have seemed to lost me. I don't actually know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman of very charitable and kindly disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing, because he happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It is a seaside resort.
Where did the charitable gentleman who had a first-class ticket for this seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I was in a handbag. A somewhat large black leather handbag with handles to it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. James, or Thomas, Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In a cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station?
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial. Mr. Worthing, I confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that remind me of the worst successes of the French Revolution, and I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station might serve to conceal a social indiscretion, has probably indeed been used for that purpose before now, but it could hardly be regarded as an assured basis for a recognized position in good society.
May I then ask you what you would advise me to do? I need hardly say I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make a definite effort to produce at any rate one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I could possibly manage to do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It is in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you.
Me, sir? What has it to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel. Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
All right, so they both leave, and she goes, there's no way in this world that I'm going to allow my daughter to marry someone who was brought up in a handbag. So you see, it's really going against English society and what they thought about marriage and social classes and things like that. Now, this is only the first act of the play. If you actually were to read the rest of the play, to make a long story short, you would find out that Jack goes about, does some research. He actually finds his parents and his real parents, and he finds out that his name was actually Ernest all along. It wasn't really Jack. It really was Ernest, the name he had been going by. And so because of that, he's able to marry Gwendolyn. So Ernest, or Jack, Ernest gets married to Gwendolyn, and I guess you could say they live happily ever after. So the play does have a good ending.